Do you trust everyone in your home? If so, then comment yes now. I'll really appreciate it. Why am I asking this? Because in this story, The House of Lurking Death by Agatha Christie dives into that unsettling question, drawing us into a world where trust feels fragile and every familiar face may be hiding a darker truth. Set against the chilling seclusion of a countryside estate, the story builds tension not through spectacle, but through quiet, creeping menace. A string of unexplained deaths linked by a mysterious poison turns the estate into a place where safety feels like an illusion. What makes it linger in the mind is not the horror itself, but the psychological precision, a portrait of people whose polite exteriors disguise festering jealousy, resentment, and fear. With Hercule Poirot methodically untangling the motives and half-buried secrets, the mystery becomes more than a simple whodunit. It unfolds into a haunting reflection on grief, obsession, and manipulation. Stay with it, not just for the final revelation, but for the unnerving journey that forces us to ask, how well do we really know those we live with? So if you're new here, just subscribe this channel, and hello, I am Uncle Lee, your host. I hope you subscribed. Now let's begin the story. Chapter 1. A Cry for Help at Blunt's. The morning at Blunt's International Detective Agency began with an unexpected discovery. Tuppence Beresford, always brisk in her movements, entered Mr. Blunt's private office from the adjoining clerk's room, only to halt abruptly. Her eyes widened in surprise. There was her husband, Tommy, standing as still as a statue, his face pressed close to a hidden peephole that overlooked the reception area. "Shh," he whispered sharply without glancing back, one finger raised for silence. Tuppence frowned. "Didn't you hear the buzzer? Someone's waiting outside. Quite a pretty young woman, too. Albert is doing his usual act, telling her you're busy on a special case with Scotland Yard." Curiosity piqued. She leaned over and nudged Tommy aside. "Let me look." Through the small aperture, she studied the visitor herself, before conceding with a little nod. "Well, she is rather smartly turned out." Tommy sighed dreamily, his imagination already racing. "She reminds me of one of those heroines in a Mason novel. Elegant, sympathetic, intelligent, without being too forward. I rather think she's destined to be my case today." Tuppence raised an eyebrow. "You? Pulling off the role of master detective? The man of disguises, shifting from comic buffoon to street urchin to wise confidant in a matter of minutes?" He banged the desk with mock authority. "I am captain of this ship, my dear. Never forget it." With theatrical flair, he pressed the buzzer, summoning Albert. A moment later, the office boy appeared, ushering in their guest. The young woman paused hesitantly in the doorway, uncertain whether to step forward. Tommy greeted her with an encouraging smile. "Please, come in. Do sit down." From behind him, Tuppence muffled a laugh, earning herself a quick glare. Tommy cleared his throat. "Did you say something, Miss Robinson?" "Not at all," she replied with feigned innocence. Turning back to their visitor, Tommy softened his voice. "Let's keep things informal. Tell me what troubles you, and we'll see what we can do." The girl gave a nervous smile. "That's very kind of you. Forgive me for asking, but are you foreign?" Tuppence gave another splutter, almost choking back her laughter. Tommy maintained composure, answering smoothly, "Not exactly. I've spent a good deal of time abroad, and my methods tend to be unconventional." The explanation seemed to impress her. She was, as Tommy had guessed, attractive in an understated way. Slender, with soft golden hair peeking from beneath a brown felt hat. Her eyes, bright and expressive, revealed both determination and unease. Her hands betrayed her nerves, fingers constantly fiddling with the clasp of her handbag. Finally, she introduced herself. My name is Lois Hargreaves. I live at Thurley Grange, a sprawling old estate in the country. The nearby village is very small, rather sleepy. Life there is quiet. I actually prefer it to the bustle of London. Winters bring hunting, summers tennis on the lawn. It may sound dull, but I've always enjoyed its peace. Her tone grew more serious as she leaned forward. I tell you this because in a place where so little happens, even the smallest incident seems magnified. About a week ago, I received a parcel, a box of chocolates. There was no card or note, no clue to its sender. I don't particularly care for sweets myself, so I shared them around the house. Shortly afterward, everyone who tasted them fell quite ill. Tommy's expression sharpened. We sent for the doctor, of course, Lois continued. He examined what had been eaten and then took the remaining chocolates for testing. His findings shocked us. They had been laced with arsenic. Not enough to kill, but more than sufficient to make everyone dreadfully sick. Extraordinary, Tommy murmured. Dr. Burton, the physician, was alarmed. He confided that this was the third such case in the district. Always at large country houses, always poisoned chocolates. His first thought was that some simple-minded local person might be playing a dangerous prank. But he also speculated it could be connected with socialist unrest, though I found that far-fetched. Still, there are one or two troublemakers in our village, so perhaps he isn't entirely wrong. She hesitated before adding, Dr. Burton insisted I should go to the police, but I didn't. Tommy's eyes narrowed. Because you wanted to avoid publicity? Lois nodded gravely. Exactly. I dread attention. And frankly, I've little faith in our village inspector. When I saw your agency's advertisement promising discretion, I thought it the better course. You won't act without my approval, will you? Tommy studied her thoughtfully, but it was Tuppence who responded, her tone calm yet firm. If we're to help, Miss Hargreaves, we'll need you to tell us everything, right from the very beginning. Chapter 2. The Shadows at Thurley Grange. The journey to Thurley Grange carried with it more than the weight of a simple visit. An undercurrent of unease trailed Lois Hargreaves as she stepped into the quiet room where Tommy and Tuppence awaited. Her hands trembled faintly, though she tried to mask it with composure. After a long pause, she leaned forward, her words hesitant yet urgent. Everything I say here, it won't leave this room, will it? The question lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Tuppence's solemn nod and Tommy's steady reassurance gave her the courage to continue. I've kept something back, Lois admitted softly, her voice barely rising above a whisper. It isn't the kind of thing I could take to the police without consequences. The truth is, I believe the box of poisoned chocolates came from someone under my own roof. Tommy's brows knit together. That's a serious claim, Miss Hargreaves. What makes you so certain? Her eyes lowered to her lap, fingers twisting nervously. It may sound trivial, but I know it's no coincidence. I have a peculiar habit. Whenever I hold a pencil, I doodle the same little design. 3 small fish, twined together. A few days before the chocolates arrived, I had received a package, stockings from a London shop. Absent-mindedly over breakfast, I scribbled that little sign of mine on the parcel's label. She hesitated, drawing in a breath. Later, when I inspected the wrapping around the chocolate box, I saw it, torn, faint, but undeniably there. My mark, my 3 fish. Tommy leaned forward, the detail striking him like a blow. Then the chocolates were wrapped using paper that once belonged to you. That suggests someone in your household repurposed it. Lois lifted her chin, her expression tightening. Exactly. And that's why I couldn't go to the authorities. If the culprit is someone within my home, someone close to me, I would rather the matter be handled quietly, without scandal, without whispers in the village." There was a long silence. Tommy weighed her words carefully before asking, "And yet, you name no one? Not a single suspicion?" "No," she answered too quickly. "But I can't shake the dread that it may be one of those dearest to me. That's the terror of it." Tommy's gaze softened, but his tone was pragmatic. "Then we must lay out everyone at Thurley Grange, family, guests and staff. Leave nothing overlooked." Lois complied, steadying her voice. "Our household has been stable for years. Mrs. Holloway, the cook, and her niece Rose, who assists her, are devoted to their work. The older housemaids have served us faithfully, and Hannah, she was once my aunt's maid, is as loyal as any servant could be. Only the parlour-maid, Maud Quant, is new, quiet, efficient, but untested." She paused before continuing. "Among the residents, there's Miss Logan, my aunt's former companion, who still helps with the running of the house. Then Dennis Radcliffe, called my cousin, though there's no real blood between us. And my dear friend Mary Chilcott, a schoolmate who has been staying with me. That's everyone." Tommy tapped a finger on the desk thoughtfully. "No suspicions, yet you sense danger pressing in. That is enough for me. The best way forward is to see the Grange myself. Tuppence and I will come under the guise of American friends, Mr. and Mrs. Van Dyne. Would such a visit appear natural?" Lois nodded, relief softening her features. "Easily arranged. Say when, and I will see to it." "The day after tomorrow, unless something forces our hand sooner," Tommy replied firmly. "But remember this, absolute secrecy. Not a soul must know who we truly are." As Lois departed, a heavy silence filled the room. Tuppence leaned against the desk, her face shadowed with unease. "I don't like it, Tommy," she muttered. "Why not?" he asked, surprised by her tone. "The arsenic," she said grimly. "There was too little of it in the chocolates. That isn't mercy. It's rehearsal, a warning shot." Tommy frowned. "You think it was deliberate restraint?" She nodded. "Yes, whoever did this wanted to establish the idea of a deranged poisoner, some faceless madman haunting the countryside. When the real strike comes, everyone will blame that phantom. But this is no random madness. It's cold planning. Someone is waiting, and next time, they'll mean to finish it." Her words lingered like a chill in the room, and for the first time, Tommy felt the shadows of Thurley Grange stretching toward him. Chapter 3. A Web of Motives. The investigation deepened with the unsettling revelation of a second death. It was only by a curious stroke of chance that anyone discovered the chocolates had come from within the household itself. What at first looked like an insignificant detail now loomed as a pivotal clue. Tommy, absorbing the implications, remarked slowly that it all felt far too deliberate. Someone was methodically orchestrating harm toward the young woman. Tuppence's reply carried a quiet weight. Yes, Lois Hargreaves appeared to be the true target. She reminded Tommy of Lady Radcliffe's will, how Lois had inherited everything, a considerable estate, only a few weeks after turning 20. Now, with her own will freshly drafted, a tragic death would see Dennis Radcliffe as the principal heir. It was an uncomfortable truth, one Lois herself must have realized, for she had refused police involvement. Her silence, Tuppence suspected, stemmed not only from fear, but also from affection for Dennis. Tommy frowned. If Dennis truly wanted her fortune, why hadn't he simply proposed? Marriage would have been the far simpler course. Tuppence tilted her head, considering. Perhaps he was already bound elsewhere. Perhaps a secret marriage back in his Oxford days had caused his family rift. Tommy, ever the skeptic, countered that if that were the case, sending poisoned chocolates to a first wife would be more logical. Tuppence huffed in mock indignation, but beneath the playful exchange, Both knew the danger circling Lois was real. The following morning brought grim confirmation. Tommy, visibly shaken, thrust a newspaper into Tuppence's hands. The bold headline screamed of tragedy at Thurley Grange. Mystery poisoning at country estate, 2 dead, others gravely ill. Lois Hargreaves and her companion Esther Quant were already lost, while Captain Dennis Radcliffe and Miss Logan clung to life. The cause, according to the report, was linked to fig paste used in delicate tea sandwiches. Only one guest, Miss Chilcott, had escaped harm by avoiding them. Tommy's face drained of color. Had he gone with Lois the previous day, he too might have eaten those sandwiches. Tuppence reminded him quietly that his survival was nothing more than fortune's mercy. Even so, Tommy was determined. They travelled swiftly to Thurley, the weight of dread heavy in their hearts. At the Grange, they were met by a sorrowful woman whose eyes were swollen from weeping. She hesitated, uncertain whether to admit them, but mentioned Dr. Burton and Miss Chilcott were inside managing the crisis. The moment he heard the doctor's name, Tommy pressed to see him at once. Dr. Burton entered a few minutes later, an elderly man with a weary face marked by compassion and exhaustion. His slightly stooped posture and troubled expression spoke of long nights by deathbeds. Tommy introduced himself as Mr. Blunt, with Tuppence posing as Miss Robinson. The doctor nodded gravely, deciding there was little point in secrecy. He admitted that at first he had considered foodborne illness, perhaps acute ptomaine poisoning, since the symptoms were consistent: violent gastric distress, hemorrhaging, collapse. But the earlier incident with the poisoned chocolates made coincidence impossible. He had already dispatched samples of the fig paste for laboratory testing. If it was indeed poison, it was not arsenic. Its effects were far swifter than most known toxins. A highly concentrated plant-based compound, perhaps, something rare and lethal. Tommy leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "And Captain Radcliffe? He too is poisoned?" The doctor hesitated, a shadow of doubt flickering in his eyes. His reply was measured, almost reluctant. No, Captain Radcliffe showed none of the same symptoms. In fact, he was not poisoned at all. Chapter 4. A Clever Trap and the Shadows of Truth. The room fell into a heavy silence before Tommy finally spoke, his voice edged with disbelief. Captain Dennis Radcliffe, he learned, had succumbed at 5 o'clock that morning. The news landed like a blow, leaving him momentarily unsteady. Dr. Burton's somber expression confirmed there was no mistake. The young man was gone. "And Miss Logan?" Tuppence asked softly, her tone almost hesitant, as though bracing for another tragic answer. The doctor's face softened with a trace of hope. "She is fighting through it. Youth is on her side, and her system seems to have resisted the worst effects. If she continues to improve, she may yet recover." He then turned back toward Tommy with measured calm. "I'll forward the laboratory report on the fig paste once it's complete. In the meantime, Miss Mary Chilcott can likely give you more immediate answers." As if summoned by name, the door creaked open and a young woman stepped inside. She carried herself with quiet composure, a tall figure with clear, sun-warmed skin and strikingly observant blue eyes. Dr. Burton introduced her with gentle formality. "Mr. Blunt, this is Miss Chilcott." Mary Chilcott inclined her head. "I cannot tell you how relieved I am you've come. Everything here has been dreadful. Please, if there's any way I can help, only say the word." Tommy wasted no time. "This fig paste? Where did it come from?" "From London," Mary answered promptly. "It's a brand we've used countless times before without issue. Nothing unusual, nothing suspect. I myself never touch it. I despise figs. Perhaps that distaste saved me." "And Captain Radcliffe?" Tommy pressed. watching her carefully. He wasn't present for tea, was he? Mary shook her head. No, he returned later, but it's possible he helped himself to a sandwich afterward. At that, Tuppence gave the faintest squeeze to Tommy's arm, a subtle signal. He shifted, his tone becoming casual. Do you recall what time he came in? I can't say exactly, Mary admitted, but if it matters, I could try to find out. That won't be necessary, Tommy replied with polite dismissal. Then, with a glance toward the hall, he added, One final request. May I question the household staff? Mary hesitated only briefly before nodding, her composure intact, though her eyes flickered with unease. Of course, do what you must. Only, I hope you don't truly believe this was intentional, that someone here meant to harm Lois. Tommy gave nothing away. For now, I'll keep all possibilities open. The truth has a way of surfacing. With that, she excused herself, stepping into the gardens beyond. As she left, Tommy leaned toward Tuppence, lowering his voice. Strange, isn't it? She speaks of distress, yet carries herself like stone. Tuppence's slight nod was all the agreement he needed. They divided their inquiries, Tommy taking the kitchen staff, Tuppence drawing aside a housemaid. Half an hour later they reconvened, piecing together scraps of testimony. The tea was served mid-afternoon, Tommy began, and Esther Quant was among those who ate the sandwiches. The cook insists Dennis wasn't home when the tea things were cleared away, Tuppence added, which raises the question, how then was he poisoned? Precisely. Tommy's eyes lit faintly with curiosity. What else? The maid I spoke to saw Dennis arrive around 5:45, Tuppence continued. He poured himself a cocktail in the library before dinner. That same glass was nearly cleaned when I intervened. I made certain to keep it aside. She produced the evidence with care. He fell ill not long after drinking from this. Tommy took the glass as though it were treasure. Excellent work. I'll hand this to Dr. Burton for testing. But Tuppence wasn't finished. Her tone dropped, more guarded now. There's another matter. One of the maids, Hannah. Something about her is deeply wrong, detached, disturbed. You should see for yourself. She led him upstairs to a modest, dimly lit chamber. There, Hannah sat rigid in a straight-backed chair, her knees pressed together, an open Bible laid across them. Her voice carried in a low, fervent chant, her eyes locked on the page as though possessed. Let burning coals fall upon them, she intoned, voice trembling with zeal. Let them be cast into the fire, never to rise again. Tommy stepped forward carefully, speaking in gentle tones. Hannah, may I have a word? She did not look up. Instead, she raised one hand with a dismissive wave. No time. The hour approaches. Her voice grew stronger, almost triumphant. I will pursue mine enemies. I will not turn until they are destroyed, Tuppence whispered beside him. She has been like this since our arrival. Tommy's gaze swept the small table by her side, where a slim volume lay face down. With deliberate subtlety, he picked it up, glanced at the cover, and slipped it into his pocket. Suddenly, Hannah rose to her feet, her eyes blazing with fanatic light. Leave this place, she cried. The end is near. I am the flail of the Lord, and the ungodly shall perish. Tommy guided Tuppence back, retreating step by step, unwilling to provoke her frenzy. Once the door was shut, the sound of her chanting resumed, unceasing, relentless. Do you think she's always been like this? Tommy asked quietly. Hard to say, Tuppence murmured. Tommy withdrew the small book from his pocket and placed it in her hands. Perhaps this will tell us more. Look what she was reading. Tuppence carefully traced the faded lettering on the spine of the old book. Materia Medica, she murmured, her tone reflective. Flipping open the cover, she added, Edward Logan. Clearly not light reading for a housemaid. This belonged to someone else entirely. Tommy leaned closer, his voice thoughtful. Then perhaps it's time we spoke with Miss Logan herself. Burton said she was regaining strength. Tuppence agreed, but quickly weighed her options. Best not to go through Miss Chilcot. Too many questions that way. Let's have one of the maids pass a note instead. Not long after, the message was answered, and they were invited upstairs. Miss Logan lay resting in a wide, sunlit room that overlooked the gardens. Her figure looked small and frail beneath the covers, her white hair framing a face lined by both illness and fatigue. "I'm still very weak," she said gently. "But Ellen explained who you are. Lois had spoken of consulting you, and I encouraged her to do so. She trusted you." Tommy moved to the bedside, lowering his tone. "We won't take much of your strength, Miss Logan. Just a few questions, if you'll allow." After a pause, he began. "One of your maids, Hannah, do you consider her entirely stable?" Miss Logan's brow furrowed, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Hannah? Why, of course. She's deeply religious, yes, but her mind is sound. She is no madwoman, Mr. Blunt." Tommy reached into his coat and produced the book he had recovered. "Do you recognize this volume?" She adjusted her glasses and studied it carefully before nodding. "Yes, that was my father's. He was a doctor, a pioneer in serum research, a brilliant man, though stern. I've always cherished his work." Tommy offered a polite smile. "I thought I'd heard the name before." "Tell me," he continued, "did you ever give this to Hannah?" "To Hannah?" Miss Logan's composure slipped. She sat up a little straighter, indignation flashing across her tired features. "Certainly not. That book is far too advanced, full of complex medical theories she could never grasp. I never entrusted it to her." "Where would you normally keep it then?" Tommy asked. "In my sitting room bookcase, of course." She paused, a flicker of memory softening her tone. "Although, yes, I lent it to Mary. She had begun dabbling with herbs and simple remedies. She sometimes uses my little kitchen for experiments, infusions, jellies, that sort of thing. Lady Radcliffe always praised my old tanny tea for her sinuses." A faint smile touched her lips. "Poor Lucy suffered terribly with colds, and Dennis too. He inherited that from her. His father was my cousin, you know." Tommy gently brought her back to the present. "This kitchen of yours, apart from you and Mary, who else uses it?" "Hannah tidies after us. She also boils water there for the household tea," Miss Logan explained with a weary sigh. "That's very helpful," Tommy said with a slight nod. "Thank you. We won't tire you further." Once outside her room, Tommy's expression hardened. "Something doesn't sit right here," he muttered as he descended the staircase. Tuppence was waiting at the bottom. Her voice was low and uneasy. "I can't bear this house. It presses down on you. Let's walk, clear our minds. Perhaps then things will make more sense." He agreed, and together they dropped the suspicious cocktail glass at Dr. Burton's before striking out across the countryside. The air was cool, and the open fields gave them space to think. "You know," Tommy said after a long silence, "sometimes it helps to put on a cheerful mask, to act the fool as though none of this touches me. But I care, Tuppence, more than I'd like to admit. I keep thinking, we might have prevented this somehow." She shook her head firmly. "Don't put that on yourself. Lois chose to come to us because she had nowhere else to turn. If anything, we gave her the only chance she had. The result would have been the same either way." "Perhaps," Tommy admitted with reluctance. "Still, it's hard not to feel we failed her. But you're right. What matters now is how we move forward. And the path ahead won't be simple. Tuppence nodded gravely. No, too many possibilities and each crumbles under closer thought. Take Dennis Radcliffe. He could have planted the poison himself, knowing he'd be absent at tea. Except, Tommy cut in, he ended up poisoned too. That wipes him out as a suspect. Then there's Hannah, Tuppence continued. Religious mania can push people into dangerous acts. She's not behaving normally. True, Tommy agreed. It's worth mentioning to Burton. Miss Logan thinks Hannah's merely devout, but such obsessions can flare suddenly. Today it's hymns in her room. Tomorrow it's talk of divine vengeance. For a moment they walked in silence before Tuppence admitted, more and more the evidence tilts toward Hannah. Yet what? Tommy pressed. It feels too simple, she said finally. Almost like prejudice dressed up as reason. Tommy narrowed his eyes. Then who? She gave the name quietly. Mary Chilcot. Tommy was thoughtful. Strange. I rather liked her. Mary Chilcot struck Tommy as the sort of woman one could easily depend upon. Capable, calm, almost too self-possessed. Yet that composure was unsettling. Doesn't it strike you as odd, Tuppence murmured, that while death seems to stalk this house, she remains entirely unshaken? No tears, no dramatics. Tommy tilted his head thoughtfully, which could just as well prove her innocence. A guilty person might overdo the sorrow, wringing their hands, feigning grief. Mary hasn't bothered with any of that. Tuppence sighed. Perhaps. Still, I can't see what possible benefit she could gain from such horrors. Tommy shrugged. That's the real puzzle. There's no clear motive. Their conversation shifted to the servants. I can't help wondering about Esther, Tommy admitted. The parlour maid. Did you notice her much? Tuppence gave him a shrewd glance. What are you thinking? That she's young, maybe attractive, and perhaps emotions are tangled up somewhere? Tommy gave a faint smile. Stranger things have driven crimes. Tuppence exhaled, weary. We've turned this over and over, yet we're no nearer the truth. The police will sort it eventually, Tommy said, though there was little conviction in his tone. But I'd rather it be us who untangled it. Then, as if remembering something, he added, By the way, did you catch sight of Miss Logan's arm? It was covered in tiny red punctures. Tuppence blinked. No. What do you mean, like injections? Exactly. Needle marks. Dozens of them. Tuppence frowned. That suggests something stronger than treatment. Addiction, perhaps? Cocaine? Tommy shook his head. Her eyes were clear, steady. She doesn't show the twitch or restlessness of a drug habit. Still, it nags at me. They lapsed into silence for a while until Tommy reminded her, we should stop at Dr. Burton's before heading back. At the doctor's house, a lanky teenage boy greeted them with awkward politeness. The doctor's not here, sir, he said, but he left you a message. Handing over a folded slip of paper, Tommy opened it immediately. The words inside made him catch his breath. Burton's note warned that the poison in question might be ricin, a deadly plant toxin, subtle and almost impossible to trace. For now, the doctor begged them to keep it secret. Tommy muttered the name aloud. Ricin. He turned to Tuppence. Didn't you once know something about that? She nodded slowly. Yes, it comes from the castor bean plant. I thought I noticed some in the garden earlier. Tall stems, glossy leaves. Whoever extracted it would need real chemical knowledge. Tommy's eyes narrowed. Not Hannah, then. She wouldn't have the skill. With sudden intensity, Tommy pulled the medical book from his coat and flipped to a page. Here, this section was marked. Tuppence scanned the words, her expression sharpening as her wartime training stirred memories. She shut the book with decision. "This time, Tommy, let me take the lead. I know exactly what this means." He gave a crooked grin. "Then the case is in your hands, Captain." Tuppence wasted no time. She strode upstairs to Miss Logan's room and entered with quiet confidence. The frail old woman greeted her gently. "My dear, you're far too young and lovely to concern yourself with police business." Tuppence smiled faintly. "Pretty or not, I spent years in hospital wards during the war. I learned enough about serum work to recognize what I've just seen. Your father pioneered research into immunity by administering toxins in minute doses. And you, Miss Logan, followed in his footsteps. You've been injecting yourself with ricin in controlled amounts, building resistance." Miss Logan's eyes widened, her fragile mask cracking. Tuppence pressed on, voice steady. "That's why you survived when others didn't. You ensured Dennis was away when you struck. If Lois died first, Dennis inherited. And with Dennis gone shortly after, all of it passed to you. As you yourself admitted, you're his closest blood relative." The silence in the room was heavy, the air taut with unspoken truth. Before Miss Logan could respond, a shrill cry cut through the stillness. Hannah burst in from the adjoining chamber, wild-eyed, clutching a flaming torch. "I saw her. The Lord revealed it to me. She plotted against my lady. Wickedness shall burn." She lunged, setting the curtains alight. Miss Logan shrieked, retreating in horror as fire spread. Tuppence grappled with the maid, struggling to wrench the torch from her grip. Tommy rushed in, seizing a heavy rug to smother the flames. The air filled with smoke and chaos, but together they subdued the frantic woman. At that moment, Dr. Burton arrived, assessing the scene quickly. He knelt by Miss Logan, his face grave. "The shock has ended her," he said quietly. "She's gone. Perhaps it's a mercy." Straightening, he added, "And I must tell you, the cocktail glass contained ricin as well." Later, with the house calmed and Hannah under medical care, Tommy and Tuppence sat in a dimly lit drawing room. Tommy reached for her hand. "You carried it all through, Tuppence. Brilliantly." She shook her head. "There was no room for play this time, Tommy. It was too cruelly real. Lois's face still haunts me." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "If it helps, remember this. One of life's best advantages is being clever without seeming so." Tuppence gave him a sidelong glance, managing a faint smile. "Tommy, you're impossible." Here's the chapter-by-chapter analysis of Agatha Christie's The House of Lurking Death. Chapter 1. A desperate visitor at Blunt's Brilliant Detectives. The story begins inside Tommy and Tuppence's small but energetic detective office, where an unexpected knock interrupts their routine. The visitor is Lois Hargreaves, a young woman whose calm appearance can't conceal the fear in her eyes. She comes from Thornley Grange, her family estate now cloaked in unease after a mysterious tragedy. Lois explains that what seems like an accidental food poisoning has already claimed one life. The authorities dismissed it as chance, but she feels a darker presence lurking in her home. Unlike the police, who are content to close the matter, Lois trusts her instincts. Something malevolent is at play. Tuppence, ever quick to pick up on emotional nuances, becomes intrigued. She senses a tangled web beneath the surface, and her curiosity pushes the duo to take the case. This opening sets the tone for the whole mystery. Evil creeping silently into ordinary domestic spaces, showing how even the most peaceful homes can harbor deadly secrets. Question for you. If someone in your family died suddenly of food poisoning, would you accept the police's conclusion, or would you dig deeper, like Lois? Chapter 2. Arrival at the estate. When Tommy and Tuppence arrive at Thornley Grange, The grand country house feels like a stage for tension. Servants whisper in the halls, the surviving relatives eye each other with suspicion, and the atmosphere is heavy with dread. Lois quietly points out her cousin Dennis, whose presence unsettles her, as well as other guests who had all shared the fatal meal. The poison was arsenic, a substance that screams of intent, not accident. This chapter explores the fragile nature of trust within families. Christie reminds us that danger is not always the work of strangers. More often, it festers behind the masks of those we think we know. We also see Tommy and Tuppence's contrasting styles, Tuppence's warmth and instinct balanced against Tommy's cool, logical reasoning. Together, they probe the household's secrets. Question for you. Could you continue living in a house where someone had died under suspicious circumstances? Chapter 3. Secrets and a Second Death. Just as suspicions begin to sharpen, the unthinkable happens. A second member of the household dies. This time, no one can pretend it's coincidence. Poison has struck again, and fear grips Thornley Grange. Every glance becomes loaded with suspicion. Conversations slip into guarded tones, and long-buried grudges begin to surface. Christie's brilliance shines here as she exposes the raw human emotions beneath polite exteriors: resentment, desperation, envy, and the kind of bitterness that can drive someone to murder. The mystery deepens into moral ambiguity. Are these deaths only about inheritance and jealousy, or is vengeance disguising itself as justice? Everyone becomes a suspect, and the idea that no one is truly innocent looms large. Question for you. In a case like this, do you think anyone is truly above suspicion, or does everyone wear a hidden mask? Chapter 4. The Trap and the Revelation. At last, Tommy and Tuppence devise a clever plan, psychological rather than physical. With careful observation and subtle probing, they lead the guilty party into exposing themselves. The motive comes down to inheritance, greed, and jealousy. The killer hoped poison would be a quiet weapon, easy to disguise as an accident, leaving no obvious trace. Yet the balance of Tommy's strategy and Tuppence's empathy tears away that mask. Though justice is served, the conclusion is not without pain. Christie emphasizes that the deadliest intentions can hide in the most ordinary acts: a shared dinner, a cup of tea, a familiar smile. The message is chilling. Violence need not roar. It can whisper softly, hidden in routine. Question for you. Which frightens you more? Visible violence, or the silent kind that comes hidden, like poison in a drink? Let's analyze key characters. Lois Hargreaves, the young heiress who seeks help when she fears her life is in danger. Her wealth and fractured family ties make her both vulnerable and a potential target. Zoe Hargreaves, Lois's quiet cousin, often overlooked but emotionally complex. Her reserved nature hides depths that play a critical role as the mystery unfolds. Miss Canning, Lois's companion, efficient yet cold. She maintains household order but adds to the strained atmosphere. Mr. Marcus, the solicitor, who clarifies the terms of Lois's inheritance and exposes potential motives lurking within the family circle. The local doctor, called in after the poisonings. His medical insights frame early discussions about how the crimes might have been carried out. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp intellect and gift for psychological insight, Poirot methodically uncovers the hidden motives behind polite facades. Captain Hastings, Poirot's loyal friend and narrator. His straightforward perspective helps ground the story, making the mystery more accessible. Housekeeper and servants, secondary figures who fill the estate with whispers and unease, reinforcing the closed-circle tension Christie is known for. My final reflections. The House of Lurking Death lingers in the mind because it isn't about grand theatrics. It's about the silent dangers that live within ordinary families. Christie shows us how jealousy, greed, and unspoken resentment can twist hearts in ways more terrifying than strangers in the night. Poirot's precision reveals the truth, but it doesn't erase the sorrow. The haunting lesson is that evil often comes disguised as civility, hidden in routine, waiting for trust to lower its guard. So, as you think about this story, ask yourself, would you ever truly feel safe in a home where trust is fragile and secrets lurk behind every smile? If you enjoyed this retelling, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. More mysteries await you right here on the channel.